Yeah. Participants.
Mhm.
And you can't do it right now because it's just you and Cheryl. But if somebody else wants, you go to
Right. Okay.
Because there's only two of you.
Okay.
But it'll give you the option.
Spotlight. What does that mean?
It means
Okay. Okay. Now I need, when I go to share today, my texts are on. Okay, share. My texts are on my texts are on my what do you call it? Page, my desktop.
Okay. So you'll just go to desktop.
Where is that?
So I think you can just
You know, I was just
X out of that.
X out of where? Here?
This page, the live stream.
Where's that?
That X right there. Okay. And now go back to your meeting here.
Uh-huh.
Click on this.
Okay, click on this.
Yeah.
See what I was doing? I was going back and forth from my Hey, Cheryl. Well, I'm just working on something here.
Oh, you're sharing your screen right now.
Yeah.
So we're going to stop the share.
Okay.
And then when you want to share the screen,
Yeah.
what I would do honestly is just go to your desktop now and open the document that you want to open.
Okay. How do
So
I get
that-
to it? Okay. We'll just.
So that it's already open.
Okay. I got to open all of these. Can I open them all?
And just minimize that.
Minimize that. And then minimize that. And then minimize this. And then minimize it. Okay.
So now go back to
Okay.
get back into the meeting. And then when you share the screen, those will just pop up and you can
okay.
click directly on them.
Okay, let me just there we go.
So that was one.
1 and 2. Okay, good. And how do and I want to
If you want to share it, just click on it.
oh, I see. Okay, well.
Good.
All right, great. All right, thank you. So good morning, Cheryl. I'm going to unmute you. Can you unmute you?
I just did.
Good. Yeah, I wanted us to be able to go on YouTube, Roku, FaceTime, and all those other good things without getting that feedback we get sometime. So, how you doing?
Okay, I've been in a group kind of texting back and forth with my family, my two sisters and their kids and my son, all about what's going on. So we've been busy with that.
I did a meditation this morning. Hi, Marilyn. How are you?
I was there and it was very helpful.
You know, if I'm telling you a mystery story, and the young and the children are trapped in the cave in, and then I don't tell you the ending, you go, well, you know,
Right.
and if I told it well and you got into it, you'd want to. And life is like that. So many so often we're living, there are no conclusions. It's a tentative, provisional conclusion. So it helped me. I don't know if it helped anybody else, but it helped.
It did. It helped me. I was up, I kept waking up all night long, every hour or two, and checking the news. I couldn't help it.
I have a radio that I have my earbuds and I have it permanently fixed on NPR, and they had results all night. And I did not listen to the results. I listened to calming music instead, because I said, they're not going to know. I'm just going to drive I still missed a lot of sleep. So anyway, I got an interesting, I imagine other people are glued to their TVs and they're right now, so maybe it's just us three, but that's fine. Incidentally, there's not going to be a class next week. I'm going to be up in North Carolina, and I'm going to be playing with my einocles, say my grandchildren, and so I just need to get away for a little bit. So anyway, let's say the blessing. I think we have an interesting text today. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Now I'm going to try and share. I'm going to try and share. And let me see. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
And I think it's pretty clear. I use my secretary's phone to take a picture. That she's got the very latest phone, and it's very clear, isn't it?
Excellent.
So
Excellent.
I think I can. My phone is, is a little older, and the camera just isn't as good. So I'm going to borrow her camera to take pictures of
Hi,
text.
Cheryl. I didn't say hello to you.
Hi, Marilyn. How you doing?
Thank God. Thank God.
So this is from Baba Batra, pages 20b through 22a. There are 3 tractates that start with the word Baba or Bava. Bav or Bob in Semitic languages means gate. Like Babylon, do you know Babylonia actually means gate of God? You'll see that word in some of the, you will see that word in the Middle East for place names, Bob, or which gate. And so there are 3 texts, there are 3 tractates, Baba Kama, which means the first gate, Baba Metzia, which is the middle gate, and Baba Batra. This is the final gate. We used to go when we'd be studying these in rabbinical school, we'd go, well, let's see, there's Baba Kama, Baba Metzia, Baba Batra, and Baba Dylan. We would,
as in Bob Dylan.
Yeah, we'd go Baba Dylan. I don't know. You kind of had to be there. But okay, so anyway, the Talmud has got a reputation of being really rambling, and sometimes it starts off with one issue, and then it gets into an issue that doesn't seem to have anything to do with what it was originally talking about.
Exactly. I just listened this morning and I said, what is this? Did they make a mistake?
It can be kind of a flow of consciousness. And one of the things, and we will try and do when we get to the end, is to say, so, okay, all of this is interesting, and all of it is interesting, but how do all of these issues kind of relate to one another? That's a question that we'll leave to the end. But don't be put off or perplexed by the zigs and the zags that this will take. So we start off with the Mishnah. The Mishnah is kind of the ground floor of the Talmud. The Mishnah was edited in the year 2000 CE, and the Gemara is the commentary of the Mishnah. And it began after the Mishnah was closed, and it goes up to about 500 CE. Okay. Okay. So we start off with the Mishnah. It seems to be this is like city zoning. It's about city zoning. If a man desires to open a shop in a courtyard, his neighbor may stop him, because the neighbor, will be kept awake by the noise of people going and coming to and from the shop. That's pretty simple, right? Okay. You remember that people, there was a configuration a family dwelling, and it was kind of like a Spanish courtyard. It may have been 2 floors, and with a courtyard in the middle, 3 sides. You would have 3 sides of apartments, and people did business often out of their houses. So the question is, so what what we have right at the beginning of the Mishnah is, hey, listen, you're going to open up a store where people are going to be coming and buying stuff. And I don't like it. I work at night, and I can't put up with the noise. I can put a kibosh on it. Or if I want to do it, you can put a kibosh on it. We have that right. Okay. So that's pretty straightforward. However, a man may make things in the courtyard to be taken out and sold in the market, and his neighbor cannot and may not stop him, because the neighbor, will be kept awake by the noise of the hammer or the millstones or children. Now that's sort of weird. If the neighbor conducted a school in the courtyard. Okay, so now what's allowed? What's allowed is you can make stuff in the courtyard. Now that might be a little noisy. I'm a tinsmith, and I'm sitting there, and I have a table there, and I'm making things, cutlery or plates, and you have to put up with that. As long as I take them out and I sell them some other place. I can't do a store, but I can do a workshop. Now, what happens here is, now notice it says you can be kept awake by, okay, we can understand the hammer or the millstones or whatever, equipment, but children are mentioned here. There's something going on here. What if my business, I'm not opening in a store, but I'm opening a little school, a little cheder, or a little daycare center, right? Am I allowed to do that? Where does that fall into the category? We got it was just sort of a little throwaway thing here about children, and we didn't know what do children have to do with the workshop. But we're really talking about 3 different kinds of enterprises: a store, a workshop, and a little school. Now, a workshop, let's say it's me, you can't stop me from doing a workshop. You can't stop me from doing a store. Okay? But now the children, it really seems to be, this daycare center, we'll call it, or a little cheder. They're slipping that in at the very end into the category of a workshop, which you cannot stop me. So let's see what the Gemara says. Why is the rule in the second part of the Mishnah not the same as the first? Does that make sense? It's a decent question. Abaya lived about 200. Now, this is the Babylonian, like the Mishnah was all about in Israel. We have the Babylonian rabbis now commenting on the Mishnah. Abaya lived, or most of his work was done between, say, 280 CE to about 310 CE, and he lived in Babylon. He replied, the second part must refer to a man in another courtyard. Okay. Rava, so the second, so Abaya says this. Now we're going to be a little there's going to be an argument here. It's really referring to somebody in another courtyard. Now Rava said to Abaya, if that is so, the Mishnah should say in another courtyard it is permitted. No,
Right.
said Rava.
That's right.
The last words of the Mishnah refer to a school since the time of the decree of Joshua ben Gamla, of whom Rav Judah told us in the name of Rav. Verily, in the name of that man, Joshua ben Gamla, is to be blessed. But for him, the Torah would have been forgotten in Israel. So, okay,
That
here
makes
you
no
go.
sense to me.
Makes no sense.
Yeah.
So Abaya and Rav and Rava, they're having an argument. Abaya says it refers to somebody in an, about not about permitting someone. Well, Abaya wants to come to the conclusion that I can also stop my neighbor from putting what do you call it? Any kind a workshop in the courtyard. But Rava says no. He says it really refers to another courtyard, and in the next complex. Rava says no. It still refers to the same courtyard, but what we're talking about here is a school. And then he goes on to talk about Joshua ben Gamla. We have a Ben Gamla school in Hollywood. It's a charter school. Have you heard of it? I wasn't really happy when it came, although it's a public school, it's a charter school, and you're not allowed to teach religion in a charter school. So they say they're teaching Jewish culture, and my argument as a rabbi is, when you're teaching Jewish culture, you're going to be teaching some religious values. But anyway, I lost the argument. I made a presentation to the city council about it. But anyway, Ben Gamla was an interesting guy. He was a high priest around the time of the destruction of the temple. Quite wealthy, apparently. I'll give you a little biographical information about Ben Gamla. Ben Gamla should never have been the high priest. He bribed King Agrippa to allow him to, he kind of bought his way into the high priesthood. But anyway, that having been said,
Nothing has changed, Rabbi.
but, some people have got a redeeming quality about them. What he did, he was a man of means. After the destruction of the temple, he said, we have to establish schools. If we're going to keep Judaism alive, we have to establish schools, public schools in a sense. The Jewish people were really advanced in this idea that we educate our children, not just the children of the rich and the privileged, but we should, this became a big deal within Judaism. And we see that the Jewish people, and this was much to our credit and benefit, we were a pretty literate people in the diaspora. We may have been as poor and as downtrodden as our Gentile neighbors, but one thing is we could read, right? We could read and we could study these texts and challenge our minds. We had a literary and a literate kind of tradition. So what Rava comes in and says, no, we're talking about this courtyard. We're talking about, it's that same courtyard. And he says that the schooling of children is so important that we have to categorize it in the same way we would categorize a workshop. You can't stop me. If I want to start a little school to teach children, guess what? You can't stop me. So, okay. And they go on. Now the conversation, remember, it starts off about what? Zoning. Really, it was a zoning question, right? Can I have a business in a residential area? Now it's about education. All of a sudden, whoop, it's about the importance of education. At first, many years ago, if a child had a father, the father taught him. And if he had no father, he did not learn at all. They were guided by the verse from the scripture, and ye shall teach them to your children, Deuteronomy, laying the emphasis on ye. So they're talking about a time, and it's before Bit Gamla, that fathers would teach their kids, right? That was the deal. Fathers should teach their children. But they're talking about, you see at the very beginning, what if he had no father, right? What if he had no father? What are you going to do with him? We have a boy in the Jewish community, and he has no father. What are we going to
He
do?
didn't learn at all.
He didn't. That was before Ben Gamla, and that was a shanda. We're going to find out that was a bit of a shanda, and because it says "Vishinantam levanecha," and you shall teach them to your children. You the dad. Okay, and if he didn't have a dad, he didn't learn. Then they made an ordinance that teachers of children should be appointed in Jerusalem. This is because of Ben Gamla. By what verse did they guide themselves? Where did they get this idea that us as a community ought to provide education for our children? Where did they get this notion that it was a mitzvah? We know it's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah for you to teach your own children. But where is it a mitzvah? Where is it a kind of a commandment or an implied commandment that we should provide education to everybody? The question also arises, what if the parents don't know much Torah, right? That's another issue. Okay, they base it on the verse that Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, for out of Zion shall the Torah go forth. Isaiah 2, chapter 2, verse 3. They base it on that. From out of Jerusalem, that, and how is that going to happen? Well, we got to make sure that even the schlepper in our community can read. Everybody should know the Torah, not just the rabbis, not just the priests, but everybody.
Every boy.
Every boy. Unfortunately, yes, I know. Yeah. What am I going to say? There was a pain, but there were literate women though. There were girls. There were yentels. Remember, like Yentl?
Yes.
There were yentels who forced themselves into yeshivas. That was happening, and we do have instances in the Talmud of very learned women who knew far more than the men.
But the mother couldn't take the son to school.
Well, I think implied here, if there was no father, the mother would do it. I don't think the actual physical delivery of the child to the school was so gender-based. But, probably the father more than the mother. But the mother, I'm sure, could drop her kids off. I know Maimonides, I remember reading a missive, a tshuva, a response that Maimonides wrote, I guess in the late 1100s, to a woman. He wrote it to a woman in Egypt. He lived in Egypt, so it was a local. You only had to put one stamp on the envelope. She had started a school, right? She had started a school in her house. She was a widow, presumably. Or I think the thing was her husband had abandoned her. He'd gone up to the land of Israel and he wasn't seen again. She had no income. So she started a school in her apartment. okay, to make some money. And the men of the community objected to it because this wasn't a seemly thing for a woman to do. And you remember, it wasn't just a Jewish society, it was a Jewish society within a Muslim society. And Maimonides said, let her have the school. Let her have the school. And he gets very mad at her husband who wasn't supporting her. But Maimonides was very progressive, saying, why not? Let her have a school. We need to teach our children. Then if she makes a little extra money, good. So anyway, that's an aside. So, okay. Let me just go to our next one. So it's kind of interesting here. It's about, what do you call it? It's about education now. Okay, so we go to the next part. They therefore ordained that, again, what happened to the zoning laws? We have a discussion about education here. They therefore ordained that teachers should be appointed in each county, and that the boys, sorry, but that's the way it was. If we wanted to use this as an inspiration to emphasize education in our day, we would say children enter school at the age of 60. Okay, so they ordained that that boys should enter school at the age of 16 or 17. That's kind of late. Okay.
What about bar mitzvah?
Bar mitzvah
separate.
wasn't a big deal.
Wasn't a big deal?
No, it wasn't. Back in Talmudic times, we have no record that I know of making a big deal of a boy being becoming a bar mitzvah. He automatically became a bar mitzvah. Other than just being called to the Torah and maybe blessing the Torah, he didn't have to read. He may not have been able to read, but that became a big deal, mostly in Europe, maybe starting in the 14, 15, 1600. He started to make a ceremony of it. So it's a relatively recent phenomenon within Judaism.
That's
Okay.
right.
So you're right. If we're so used to bar mitzvah being such a big deal, sometimes we don't see the kid again after the bar mitzvah.
Right.
So that's why it seems strange to you. But so they ordained earlier, like this would have been, I guess, during the time of Ben Gamla or before, at the age of 16 or 17. But if the teacher punished these boys, they would rebel and leave school. At length, Joshua ben Gamla came and ordained that teachers of young children be appointed in each district and each town, and that the children should enter school at the age of 6 or 7. So we're looking here, what I find here is it's much easier, you should start earlier. So Ben Gamla said, no, you don't, 16, 17, it's too late. They're going to be quarrelsome teenagers. See that you see how the teacher's fighting with them and having to punish them. I mean, I'm the father of 2 boys. I tell you, they were much easier when they were 5 and 6 than they were when they were teenagers. So what he's saying is, start them earlier. And if you're going to be teaching 16 and 17-year-old boys the letters, at least as children, you can teach them the letters. Maybe you can't teach them sophisticated concepts, but start them early is what Ben Gamla.
When was this? When are we talking about now?
We're talking about the 1st century. Ben Gamla lived in the 1st century. That would be about 70. The temple was destroyed in the year 70 CE. Okay. And Ben Gamla, well, he was alive at that time, but he was maybe 80, 90 CE. He was still very concerned that, you know, that nobody was going to know anything in the Jewish community.
That was the first temple we're talking about, right?
No, the second
The
temple.
second one?
Yeah,
Second
Herod's
one.
temple.
Okay.
Yeah.
The second one.
So Rav said to Rabbi Samuel ben Shilta, these were also a Babylonian. Remember, Rav meant the Babylonian rabbi. Rabbi meant
Jerusalem.
someone in Jerusalem. Okay, so Rav, I'm not sure how they got together, but so Rav says to Rabbi Samuel ben Shilta, before the age of 6, do not accept pupils. From that age, you can accept them and stuff them with Torah like an ox. So Rav also said to Rabbi Samuel, when you punish a pupil, only hit him with a shoelace.
A wet noodle.
A wet noodle. That's exactly.
This was
that's
actually written.
That's what we would
This
say.
was actually written. This is
Don't be too
why.
hard on him. The attentive will read by himself, and if one is inattentive, put him next to a hard-working one. So here he's giving some advice, pedagogical advice. He said, if you're going to punish a kid, don't overdo it. Hey, I went to school in Canada, and I caught the tail end of the English system where they used to cane. So I took some of that. I wish Rob Samuel had been around. I wouldn't have gotten, we got caned. We did, got your homework
Wow.
bent over, whack,
Wow.
Wow.
But he said he wasn't into corporal punishment apparently, and if he was, he said make it not so bad. And that was pretty progressive. And he said, listen, you got a boy who's not catching on so quickly. Put him beside a boy who's really smart. And now that's good. That's good. That's good advice too, because sometimes the more advanced kid will actually help and inspire the less advanced. Okay.
Excuse me, Rabbi, let me understand something. The Gemara is taken from what is written in the Bible. Am I understanding it's their interpretation?
Not really.
What is it? That's my confusion.
Okay. Okay, I probably should have given a little more background about the Talmud. In Judaism, when a rabbi speaks of the Torah generally, right? You're thinking about, those scrolls.
Right.
But that's not what rabbis think of. Rabbis think of two aspects of the Torah: the oral Torah and the written Torah. That in there is the written Torah, the 5 books of Moses. In Rabbinic Judaism, Rabbinic Judaism, not biblical Judaism, but Rabbinic Judaism, is with the rise of the rabbis. They said that Moses was instructed by God about an oral tradition. Well, there are many commandments that have the force of law that do not appear in the Bible. They don't appear in the Torah, the 5 books of Moses.
The 5 books don't appear in the Torah?
No, they do. The 5 books appear, but there are these other laws that don't appear in the Torah. But they were passed down.
The oral, what was told to him.
Yeah, Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral tradition. And for example, let me give you an example. On Friday night, you light 2 candles, most of you, okay?
Right.
And it said, and the blessing is Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher kiddushanu v'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Right.
Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and has commanded us concerning the kindling of the Sabbath lights. I dare you to show me any verse in the Torah that tells you to light candles on Friday night.
Wow,
It's just not there.
I never knew that.
Never, it's not there.
Hmm.
But we still say, who has sanctified us by his commandments and has commanded us to light the light for Shabbat.
That's the oral.
It's the oral. They said, well, it was passed down. This this was one of the oral traditions passed down. It wasn't written down, and it doesn't appear in the Bible, but nonetheless, it was passed down from generation to generation. And finally, now that the temple is destroyed, the people are being dispersed, and we have to write it down. The oral tradition becomes written down, and in the Mishnah and the Gemara, and some would say the Midrash as well, you know, and the Rabbi, and it becomes a written tradition. The oral tradition becomes a written
So
tradition.
the oral goes to the written. Okay.
Yeah.
And was it Rashi who did a lot of the work to develop the Mishnah?
No,
guess-
Rashi was much later. Rashi lived in the 1100s, the 11th and
Okay.
12th century. He was in Provence, France. Shlomo ben Yitzchak, and he was a great commentator. He was a great grammarian, which is interesting. He commented. We have the Rashi commentary on the Torah. He also made beautiful comments and elucidations of the Talmud in the Talmud, and his commentary is found it's very prominently displayed on a page of Talmud. But he's much later.
Okay.
He's at least 500 years after
I see.
the Gemara was and the Mishnah were put together to make the Talmud.
So the two scrolls that you have are the written that came from the oral that's in the temple now. Those,
No,
you open it up.
the oral,
Not the written?
no,
The written preceded the oral.
the written preceded the oral.
The
Now,
written preceded.
Okay, I'm going to tell you, the rabbis would say they were simultaneously given at Sinai.
That makes
Except
sense to me.
Certain ones were written down and certain ones were just transmitted orally.
That's
So
interesting.
one didn't come from the other.
One had nothing to connect to the other. They were two separate things.
Two separate things, but equally binding, both coming from Sinai, both coming from God.
Interesting.
And as I gave you the example of lighting the candles, right?
Yeah.
It's not back there, not behind me. It's in the Talmud. Okay, so Rava said under the ordinance of Joshua ben Gamla. You're really getting an education about Joshua ben Gamla today. You're an important guy. Children were not sent to school every day from one town to another, but they can be compelled to go from one section to another in the same town. If, however, there is a river between the two sections, we cannot compel them to go to the other section of town. But if, again, there is a bridge, we can compel them. Not, however, if the bridge is merely a plank. Okay, so what are we talking about here? What are they talking about here?
I'm going to guess that maybe if it's not dangerous, that you should be able to go to school, but if there's some danger in getting there, that you're not required.
Yeah, don't send them from town to town, you know, to get their education. On Tuesday, you're in this building in town, and then you go to the next town, and then to the, you know, because it's about bus, it's transporting children. There's a certain danger and maybe an expense involved here. But within the same area, you can have them go from building to building. And a bridge And they're talking about, again, the reason that I think they're talking about, they're worried about the children's safety, is they're saying you can't compel them to go across a river. You know, if on, if you know, but if there's a bridge, a decent, not just a plank, but a bridge. Why? Because we don't want the little kids. We don't want them falling down, drowning. You know, transporting children is a tricky thing. That's how I'm seeing it. Okay. Now, now we're going to get into the quality of the teaching. Again, we started off with zoning. It's all about education. Okay. So Rava said further, if there are two teachers, one of whom moves his students ahead quickly, but with mistakes, and one who gets on slowly, but without mistakes, we appoint the one who gets on fast and makes mistakes, since mistakes correct themselves in time.
Hmm.
Dimi from Nehordea was a town, a Jewish town along Euphrates, the banks of the Euphrates in Babylon. Great academy there. On the other hand, said, he disagrees. He says, point one, who teaches slowly but without mistakes. For once a mistake is implanted, it cannot be erased.
Hmm.
What's your opinion? Teacher recovers a lot, but with mistakes, or someone who's more methodical, teaches a little bit, but teaches without mistakes?
My opinion is that the one who's more interesting will stimulate the children to learn, and that's probably the one that moves ahead faster, while the meticulous one might be boring, and therefore the children might not follow along. And that as we develop, we do learn that certain things are not what we were originally taught.
Yeah, it could be. You know, I have a friend. I just connected with a friend who is a renowned classical guitarist. He's been all over the world. I mean, he plays Bach and Vivaldi on, you know, medieval stuff on. And I want to take some lessons with him, right? It's my friend Gordon. He lives up in North Carolina, and you know, over online. He's got a school that he teaches online. And I said, you know, Gordon, I've been a picker and a strummer for many years. I know I have bad habits. You know, I don't arch my fingers the way they should, and you know, the wrist goes a certain way. And you know, if you're really into guitar, you know, you know, it's the placement. It's like a violin almost. If it's played properly, you know, most people don't bother with that. But if you really want to up your game, you bring your elbow almost into the rib cage to get a nice clear sound on the guitar. And you got to, and I know I don't do all of that. I just, you know, do this. So I said, you know, if I'm going to study with you, Gordon, you know, I got decades of bad habits. I know, and they may be hard to change. You know, I I and he said, don't worry about it. You know, he'll you know, but you know, if you do implant a mistake in someone in early on, it can be a lifelong kind of thing. You know, so one is you got this with athletes. Throwing a football. You know, there's a good way of doing it and a bad way. I mean, there may be a way when you're playing in high school that you can get by. You can throw it and do a nice 20-yard pass. But I'm sure there are techniques. But if you do it wrong, you might be able to do it 20 yards. When you get out to college, or if you're going to go play in the pros, and you need to throw a football 50 yards accurately, you know what? I'm sure kids who've learned the wrong way, they got to learn all over again.
Mm.
I'm sure the same thing in baseball. And
Point. That's
yeah.
a good point.
So when you're learning Torah, they're saying, learn right. So I think Dimi here carries, he says, and you can be, somebody, I've had teachers who have said, you're going to teach yourself a lot. We're not going to cover a lot of material. We're going to cover a little bit of material, but I'm going to give you a methodology, of analyzing a text, reading a text. And this is how you do it. And I'm not going to cover you on your own. Once you're up to speed on how to do it, you'll teach yourself. You'll do a lot of stuff, but we're not going to do a lot of stuff. I've seen that. I've had teachers, and I like that, actually. Teach me the method, and that can be very interesting if it's done well. Cheryl, you have a law background, right?
No, that's Ira.
Oh, Ira. Okay, you social work.
I was a government executive.
Oh, government executive. Okay, but it's in the law, like if Ira were here, I would say, Ira, you could learn a lot of cases and learn them wrong or learn them very superficially, but I would think in the training, a good training of a lawyer, you would want to read it slowly. You would want to be able to analyze it, see the parallels, see the precedents, how to read between the lines, how is it put together. But why do I, and you're out there in the field, once I teach you that, go online and find out the cases. Why do I have to
I
teach
can
you?
see that. Yeah,
Yeah.
he actually, Ira loves to read the fine print, and
Yeah.
I find that boring.
Well, that's how he was taught. Marilyn.
I taught for 34 years.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
And from what I'm thinking of when I was teaching, I would give them the foundation in the class as a lesson.
oh, okay.
And then as for homework, you would carry it over to what was learned in the class. So it would reinforce
Very
whatever
nice.
the concept was,
Yes.
and they could carry it on by themselves. And then when we would review it, we would discuss the relationship. So that would be the connection.
You were doing it the way Rabbi Dimi
Yes.
said,
What grade did you teach?
I taught every grade from kindergarten through 7th grade. I taught children in a special program who were held over not once, but twice. And then I got a second master's. I learned the gifted education, and I taught 2nd grade gifted for 17 years.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, very good. Well, you're with Dimi. Who was he arguing with? Okay, it doesn't matter. Okay, so Rava said further, a teacher of young children, a vine dresser, a ritual slaughterer, a shochet, a circumciser, a moil, and a town scribe are all liable to be dismissed immediately if they make mistakes. The general principle is that anyone who makes mistakes cannot be corrected, is liable to be dismissed immediately if he makes them. I always go, if I make them, they're talking about some very important things. Ritual slaughterer, if he doesn't do it right, the whole animal isn't kosher, right? A circumciser, you better be, or scribe, makes on a contract that these, and they're just saying, we're training people to be meticulous here. I always go, look at, I'm a rabbi. If I misquote the Bible, nobody's going to die. I'm lucky. I'm not a surgeon. I should try and be as precise. If I was teaching other rabbis, or I would, I'm trying to be precise with you. I'm trying to teach you what's correctly, but but he's just emphasizing the importance of being meticulous And again, getting back to you, Marilyn, you believe in teaching kids the right way and let them use the method to go and teach themselves eventually. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So Rabbi Huna said, now we get back to zoning. Oh, they go, oh, we forgot. We were talking about zoning. We got off on the subject, but that we got talking about education just because somebody threw in children in a courtyard, in a business in a courtyard. What if it was a preschool? Okay. So now they go, ooh. Okay. Rav Huna said, if a resident of an alley set up a hand mill, or another resident of the alley wants to set one up next to him, the first has the right to stop the second, because he can say to him, "You're interfering with my livelihood." Now we're talking about talking a little bit of zoning. We're talking about laws about competition. I have a hand mill, and I buy grain, and I'm grinding, and I'm in the alley. It's a public way, but I've set up shop there making flour. Okay, people come and buy flour to make bread. I take the grain and I'm grinding it. You go, hey, it's got a good business there, and you set up next to me. I have the right, according to this, to say no. You can't do that. Find your own place further down, right? So there is a concern here that people do not interfere with each other's livelihood. I remember I was living in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, where they're still counting the votes right now, incidentally, just outside of Philadelphia. And there was in Oxford Valley, that's a little neighborhood there. They had a McDonald's. Okay, it was nice, and it was there for a couple of years. And then right across the street, they opened up a Burger King. And I was thinking to myself, how stupid. Why did Burger King open up a place right across the street from McDonald's? And it was literally right across the street.
I think there's a principle of economics that dictates
what was
doing
going on there? Someone explained it to me from a business point of view. What do you think it was?
That way Burger King will have all the business on the other side from where McDonald's is.
Well, maybe you're getting back, if they were following this this line of thinking in the Talmud.
I don't know.
Someone, I was talking to a friend who had more business sechel than I did. He said, "Well, look at, the people do a lot of market research, right? If you're McDonald's, it could cost them $1 million or more to start to buy a McDonald's franchise. It might be more expensive nowadays. And so you're not going to just open a place up until you study it, right? Is there a school nearby? Are there truckers driving by who might, is there a shopping? There was a shopping nearby. So what do? I'm Burger King. You're McDonald's. You've done all of the market research, and I'm watching you. They watch each other, and they go, you know what? People are lining up to get into that McDonald's. I'm Burger King, and there's some new apartment buildings being built in the neighborhood. You know what? I'm building right across from them. They've already done the marketing for me, the market research. Makes sense. But here in the Gemara, they're saying it's pashnish. The Jew doesn't do this to another Jew. So anyway. Now, Ravina said to Rava, may we say that Rav Huna adopts the same principle as Rabbi Judah? For we have learned, Rabbi Judah says that a store, now they're talking about something different. Okay, this is kind of
Something different now. Okay.
this is kind of interesting. This is about marketing, unfair marketing. Okay, and again, what's this got to do with zoning or education? It's kind of like they're off to the races on another thing here. Said Ravina to Rava, may we say that Rav Huna adopts the same principle as Rabbi Judah? For we have learned, Rabbi Judah says that a shopkeeper should not give presents of popcorn and nuts to children because this lures them to come only to his store.
Hmm.
They didn't really have corn. It was probably roasted, grain of some sort and flavored. I don't know. I shouldn't be giving out samples to children to get them to come to my store. Because listen, if the kids come in my store, who's going to follow them? The parents.
Parents.
Oh, I got a special on lima beans, Mrs. Cohen. Oh, here's your kid. Oh, your child came. I was giving him some roasted peanuts here. And so Huna, quoting Judah, says, "This is not kosher. You shouldn't do that." See on the okay. The rabbis, however, and the rabbis get the when it's anonymous and it's toward the end of the verse, we think usually that's the law, right? Whatever comes last, and if it's anonymous. So the rabbis, however, allow this on the grounds that the first shopkeeper can say to the other, just as I make presents of nuts, so you can make presents of almonds. However, in the same case, the man who sets up a shop next to another, the first can say, you were interfering with my okay. So the rabbis say it's okay. Hey, if one does it, as long as it's not an unfair advantage. But okay, let's go to the next.
Rabbi, would the rabbis be the Supreme Court?
Not here. The rabbis
No?
would be more like a municipal court.
Okay, but
We had something. We had something called the Sanhedrin, which had 23 rabbis. That was for very extraordinary cases.
So
Okay.
that's like a Supreme Court, right?
Yeah, that was like our Supreme Court. Now there were different levels. Okay, an objection was raised against Rav Huna's ruling. A man may open a shop next to another man, or a bathhouse next to another man's bathhouse, and the latter may not object because the second man can say, I do what I like on my property and you do what you like on yours. Okay. So we have an argument. Hey, let people do, it's free enterprise, right? What if I, butt out? If I'm doing it on my land, on my property, you don't have a right to tell me what I can do and can't do. So this is what we call a machloket. This is a disagreement. The rabbis were disagreeing. This is the nice thing about Talmud. You could see, and you can see how Jews love to chew over an issue and how we argue with each other. That's why that we're an argumentative people. That's why so many of us are lawyers. And it starts here in the Talmud. On this point, there is a difference among Tanaim. There are Tanaim, that's how we refer to the rabbis who wrote the Mishnah. The Amoraim, that's how we refer to the rabbis who wrote the Gemara. I don't know whether it's good to know those names, but you don't have to. So on this point, there's a difference among Tanaim. That would be among the rabbis of the Mishnah. The residents of an alley can prevent one another from renting to a tailor or a tanner or a teacher or any other craftsman, but cannot prevent another resident of the alley from setting up his own competing shop. Okay, so what do we have here? They're talking. I think what we're dealing with here is people who actually live adjacent to the alley. Maybe their homes abut, the public way, and they're talking about um, they're what they're talking about is, okay, I own a little bit, I own my house. I might have a little house abutting the alley, and I have a little business there, and I have a little extra room, right? And I've set up a little, maybe a little tent or something there, and maybe I'm a tinsmith, but I have a little extra room, and there's somebody from another neighborhood. He's a tailor, or he has the same business as my neighbor. I here it says now, say he's a tailor, this guy from outside the neighborhood who wants to rent some of the space in front of my house to do, to do that. And my neighbor is a tailor, okay? And my neighbor says, "What are you doing?" He comes to me and he says, "What are you doing? You're renting, um, to some guy who's from another neighborhood or maybe another town to be a tailor. That's going to ruin my business." Oh, he can prevent me from renting to another tailor from another part of town. But if the tailor is from that same area, the same neighborhood, maybe the same alley, you can't stop him. Um, there are covenants, I think. I'm not sure how. I've never owned a business in a uh, in a what do you, in a shopping center, but I think there are covenants. If I have a men's shop and I rent, who's this guy? This Israeli guy owns all of the strip malls in South Florida. Ronan Katz. You ever seen that on? He owns Diplomat. You see, he has a little basketball hoop thing, symbol, and it's RK. Maybe you've seen that name on a lot of the strip centers
Yes,
around. You see
okay.
them in Allendale. He owns a bunch of them. He's a very wealthy guy. Uh, I think what happens is, if I own a men's shop, I'm selling men's clothes. I think you can negotiate to saying to the owner of the shopping center, "Listen, I have a men's shop here. I have to be the only men's shop, okay, in this shopping center, or the deal's off." Because it's competition to me. Okay, uh, we're going to finish this up. Certain basket sellers brought baskets to Babylon. The town people came and stopped them from selling the baskets. So they appealed to Ravina. He said, "They have come from outside and can sell to people from outside, visitors to the city. This permission, however, applied only to market days, but not to other days. And even on market days, only to selling in the market, but not going around to houses." So yeah, you had a problem here. Now we got some case law, right? Uh, basket basket makers or sellers come into town, and they were competing with the local basket makers. And Ravina said, "Oh, they can do that, but they cannot. That they should only sell, to outsiders. It's a market town, right? And a lot of people come in. They can't sell to the locals, and they can't go around house to house, right? Knocking on people's doors. It's poshnish." So he found a way to settle this. What they're trying to do here is make order in the marketplace, in businesses, that people shouldn't be cutthroat. Certain wool sellers brought wool to Pum Nahara. The townspeople tried to stop them from selling. The wool sellers appealed to Rav Kahana, who said, "They have a perfect right to stop you." The wool seller said, "There are people in this town who owe us money. If so, said Rav Kahana, you can go and sell enough to keep you until you collect your debts, and then you must go. So, you know, there's always an exception to a rule, saying, what if the local people owe me money? I'm an outsider. You say I can't come in and sell, you know, the
They owe me
marketplace,
money.
but they owe me money. He says, okay, in that case, you can go and
Get your debts.
because you can collect your debt. You can sell your baskets, maybe enough to make enough money to satisfy the debt. So we see what the rabbis are trying to do is to make order. One thing that bothered the rabbis was disorder. Maybe I'm going to teach you a word from the Talmud that had currency in Yiddish. I used it when I was a kid at camp. I learned the word because we did a lot of Hebrew, and actually the word is from the Hebrew, but it's I knew it as chaos. You know, let's say when I was you come across a situation, say it's Hefker. Ever hear that? Hefker.
Hefkin,
Sure.
Hefker. I know we used to use it. And they'd say, this is Hefker. This is, nobody knows what the hell's going on here. Well, who's in charge here? This is Hefker. You know, what's going on here? It's disorderly. Hefker literally was a very specific legal term in the Talmud. It meant literally ownerless, right? There is something on the street and it's ownerless. People are going to fight over it, right? The rabbi said we have to have a way of determining who has ownership of this. Because if we just say, well, it's finders keepers, people are going to beat the hell out of each other trying to get it, right? We don't like that. We don't like that. We want some logical, fair ways to determine belongs to. Okay? And what we've seen here, and we can get into, returning lost items is a whole art form in the Talmud. We're not going to get into today, and I'm going to bring this to a close. But rabbis, they said, when we establish our Jewish communities, we need order. We need a fair way of trying to figure out, you know, we want to be fair to the individual. We have to be fair to the community. And sometimes the rights of the community interfere with the rights of the individual and vice versa. And we want order. You know, we want fairness, but we don't want Hefker. And you can see in these last few bits what we studied. You know, people competing. We don't want fights in the street. So they were, and that's the beauty. That's
no
the beauty
fighting,
of Talmud.
no fighting.
No
Just
fighting.
like today.
Let's
Just
figure
like
it out. The rabbis would say, you know, like here at the very end of this very last one, they established an idea that you know, an outsider just couldn't come in and sell, you know, to everybody. You got a bit, you know, we have businesses. We want to protect our businesses in our community. But what if he only sells to other outsiders? Well, okay. What if they owe him some money? You know, and they're not forthcoming in paying their debt. You know, the residents or well, you can see what Ghana was trying to do. He said, okay,
Right.
so there's always some kind of wiggle room here. Okay, I hope it was fun. I hope you learned something.
It was, thank you.
Makes you think, doesn't it?
Yes.
Talmudic study really makes you think.
And it is interesting how one thing leads to the next. So.
Yeah, it's a little rambling. You got to sort it out, you know. you know, it's all kind of entwined, but the part of the fun of it is to, you know,
Unravel.
unravel it. But there's logic to it. There's a lot of logic to it.
But what I think of, Rabbi, is how today, how unlike it is to what we just read.
How so?
Well, if somebody has a business, I have seen other businesses like a McDonald's and the Burger King open up across the street. And there are people who come in who try to take away the business. And
Yeah.
this has existed despite what we just read.
Well, I suspect, I haven't really gotten into local politics and zoning laws and stuff like that. It's never been something that's been an issue for me. I would imagine that you have these sorts of discussions on city councils, right? You know, the city of Hollywood wants to protect its businesses. It's been trying to develop downtown Hollywood for a long time. You know, you
Well,
can
maybe the
imagine.
permits, they
permit.
give permits to people and that controls it a bit. the
You know,
permits,
you have zoning laws, and then you have
Right?
variants, and the variances give you a little wiggle room. You know, can I open up a business in a residential area? And in some cities, they're very strict. No. You can. Chabad really messed things up here in the city of Hollywood. You know, there was the way liberal courts for many years said there was a separation of church and state, right? And the way this was interpreted by the courts was a city can say churches cannot be, you know, in residential areas, or you have to have a certain amount of parking. Like our synagogue, I'm sure 65 years ago, whenever it was made, you had to have a certain amount of parking. You had to have a certain. Well, Chabad came in. They've established a precedent that now and that they came here to our community, and they established a national precedent because more conservative leaning courts have said you can't interfere. They can set up a shtibel anywhere they want in the middle of a residential area. And, you know, there'd be Jewish people who objected in Emerald Hills. They said, wait a minute, you know, we don't need a lot of cars. We got a problem with the parking.
That's right.
You know, and so we're not, obviously we're not against synagogues, but, you know, well, they, you know, they won the case. And, you know,
People won the
and
case.
Chabad
They
said,
they
look at
didn't
those
have a
Jews, those
synagogue.
non-Orthodox Jews. They're anti-Semites. No, they weren't anti-Semites. They just said, hey, come on, we have some rules here, and it makes for a nice neighborhood, traffic flows.
There's the order. So then the order still is wanted. So then
So,
it does connect.
So we have these machlokets, we have these arguments today, and maybe, you know, and but the Talmud gives us a framework of thinking about it. Okay, I'm going to be up in North Kakalaki next
Happy
week.
Thanksgiving to both of you.
Enjoy.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
Stay
I
well,
gotta
you
I
and
gotta
your
make up
family.
my mind. I've been invited to a family thing.
Be careful.
Yeah,
Wear
be
your
careful.
mask. Get your mask.
Yeah,
Keep
I don't know. I don't know. They said, I told them I'm a little bit cautious about Maryland and me coming. They said,
No
well,
joke.
you can eat outside on the deck, you know. And I said, well, maybe, you know,
Well, do it.
they're
Do
going to
it.
maybe do it outside. And I said,
Do it.
we'll
Do
see.
it. Be careful,
But be careful.
Yes,
both of you.
Wear your
yes,
mask.
I will be.
Wear your
Okay.
mask.
Beautiful.
So stay positive and test negative.
And stay
Sounds good.
safe.
That's
Stay
good.
safe. Stay
Take
safe.
care. Be well.
Thank you,